So I'm looking at your stuff. Celtic Shaman.
It's a strange one, that, because I never thought I had a right to be called a shaman. I come from a very dubious background of running illegal casinos for the mafia years ago, to losing everything, then finding a spiritual path. And I thought I was I just thought I had the gift of the gab, that I could tell a good story. It wasn't until I went to America and worked with Native Americans that they told me I was a shaman. And the word shaman is actually a Northern European word that means medicine person. So I'm reclaiming it, because in the 60s with Carlos Castaneda, it changed. It meant something different. But it just means a person who follows the medicine path. And I try and share the medicine of the Celtic and Nordic tribes of Europe that have been completely lost. So my Northern European tribal heritage is completely eradicated. There are a few books here and there, and there's legends of King Arthur, but we really have to dig to find the nuggets, or we have to channel from the past. Now, I didn't believe in any of this. I just thought it was all codswallop back in the day, but things have happened to me that allowed me to start trusting my own intuition, trusting my voices I hear, trusting spirit, that have led me to find peace and happiness in my life.
Wow. All right. So when we're talking about the history,
Yeah.
what do you think some things that are lost, just straight off the bat,
So it's the storytelling. So within the stories that we're taught, these are great archetypal stories. Like, prime example is the Arthurian story. It's the hero's journey. It's the hero who goes out, who's abandoned, goes on a quest, finds a mentor, hits rock bottom, comes back, claims his throne. Doesn't matter if that's King Arthur, Harry Potter, Jon Snow. It is a story that we look at and we can connect with. And we all go on that journey ourselves. And through the shamanic path and the sagas and the stories and the Celtic tales, we learn to work out the archetypes. So we do this thing called the initiation of the Northern Gateway. It's the entrance into Avalon. And for those of you who don't know what Avalon is, it's a mystical land that lies between dimensions. And Glastonbury is that place because of where all the ley lines could make the veil is finished. But a long, long time ago, this is post-Roman and pre-Celt, a time in Britain it's called, not the Dark Ages, that's later, but it's the period before the legend of Arthur. There was a king called Amangon, and it's what we call it's called the breaking of the fairy accord. The breaking of the fairy accord.
Sorry, my dog is fucking
The breaking
going crazy.
Of the fairy accord it's crazy. I've got to shut them out. Is the contract between the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And we have this a lot in the spiritual path. Along the spiritual path, most of the people I come into contact with are predominantly women. There are very few men who hold a masculine energy on the spiritual path, and very few men who are willing to open up to it. I come from a very masculine world, and now my friends from that world call me Dumbledore. They think I've gone nuts. But through the sagas and the stories, we allow the masculine to connect with spirit, but we also understand the breaking of the fairy accord between the masculine and the feminine, when the masculine started disrespecting and abusing the divine feminine. No matter where you go in the world, with indigenous people, we have Mother Earth and Father Sky. But then around this period of when the Celtic pagans and the Romano Britons who were Christian collided, we have this period where in Britain we had all these, the Lady of the Lake, the 9 handmaidens of the wells, the 9 handmaidens of the seas in the Norse tradition. There was this tradition, whenever you went to a Celtic well, there was always handmaidens there to serve you and to heal you and give you hospitality. The Roman Christian church at that time didn't like this. And when the Roman period finished and we had these Romano Britons, this king called Amangon and his knights, I suppose, they drove those women away from the wells, the healing women, the teachers, the carers, and they drove them into the forest, and they became witches, hags, sirens, nymphs, all negative terms for the divine feminine healer. And that was the beginning of the breaking of the divine feminine. And ever since, through a lot of the Judaic Christianity, Islam, all of those worlds, the stories are very negative in the form of the feminine. But we can't heal the planet until we get it back in balance. We need the healing energy of the mother, but the warrior's energy as well. And unless you accept both, there's never a balance. So you can't have too much feminine because men aren't attracted to it. And you can't have too much masculine because that doesn't honor the feminine. Through these stories, the archetypal stories that our ancestors told around the fire, that comes back into balance. So when I do the story of Avalon and we do the Arthurian story and the Grail quest, there's a part of it where you go through the Guardians. And I explain to the students, not everybody's going to get the Grail. And they go, what, me? I can't get the Grail? No, not everybody can. But it doesn't mean you're not intrinsic to the story. So if you look at the story of King Arthur, Arthur doesn't get the Grail, Lancelot doesn't get the Grail, Guinevere doesn't get the Grail, Merlin, the wisest of all wizards, doesn't get the Grail. It's Percival, the fool, who touches the Grail and then gives it back because he doesn't know what it is. It's that divine naivety, but that pure innocence must be protected from the world by others with experience. And we go around. So I'm a sage now. I'm an old guy, you know. When I was young, I thought I knew everything. It's only now I'm old, I realise I know nothing. And we all have to walk that path. And through the stories I tell, we also do something which is fairly unique. In all my stories and all my visions, I use the runes. Most people don't understand what the runes are, but it's the Anglo-Saxon language, the Germanic tribes of Britain, and it's used not just for divination, but for writing, but also for guiding us on visions. So when we connect with spirit during classes, or when I'm working my shamanic, or when I'm working to somebody to heal them, I don't know nothing about them. I'll cast the runes, and the runes will connect me to the divine cosmos, web, whatever you want to call it, the gods, and they tell me what to do. And I trust them implicably, and it puts my ego aside. And then what I do seems to help and heal people, it seems to guide them on their journeys. That's by me just looking at some stones that I've cast down. I don't know how that works. I'm not supposed to know. I'm just supposed to accept. And we find it very hard in the modern age to accept. We question everything, you know, but we are supposed to question. I know my path is experiential. A spiritual path should be experiential. You shouldn't just read about it in a book. You have to feel it. And there is only one truth. That's your truth. And whatever you find along your way is your truth, and you're entitled to it. And everybody else is entitled to their truth. It's when we start saying I'm right and you're wrong, that's when all the problems occur. But on my spiritual path, we have to work with three things. And that is the land. Wherever you live in the world, that is sacred. That is your divine connection to the earth. Secondly, we have to work with your gods, whoever they are to you, whether it's Allah, Buddha, Christ, Odin, Freya, you know, or the collective consciousness, or aliens. It's completely individual to you. And finally, we have to honor our ancestors, whether you like them or not. They're the reason you're here. So shamanically, I have to be in balance with all things, and those are the three things that I honor when I work with the land, when I tell the stories of Avalon. And even when I go on the land of Avalon, I'll stop and say prayers and ask permission to be their voice. You know, I never used to pray. I come from, my father's an Irish Protestant, my mother's an Italian Catholic. Made no sense to me as a kid at all. You know, I was just a wise guy. But now on my path, I've learned to pray. And that prayer must be authentic. It's not a set prayer that I say. It just comes and I speak with my heart and openly. So I'm a heathen. Do you know what a heathen is?
I mean, people say it nowadays, but it might be a little bit different.
So now it's a derogatory term, like, oh, you filthy heathen, you dirty heathen.
Right.
Well, actually, when you go back in time, a heathen is just somebody who sees God on the heath, in the forest, on the land. I don't need a church or a temple. Nature is my God. And when I stand on the hills or in the forest or on the heath, I'm the closest to my God. So I'm a heathen. I'm happy to say that. Pagan is something different, but I believe in the light of Christ, but I believe in many things. And I believe my path, I follow the Celtic and the Norse traditions, and I try and teach that path, but I wouldn't have found my path unless I'd worked with Native Americans and their energy. You know, so we all have our own mixture of what, not religion, faith is. And faith is really important, and there isn't a single story, a single angst, a single emotion that we're feeling now that our ancestors haven't felt 1,000 times over. You know, it's there's a teaching. Do you know what Odin is?
Yeah.
So Odin is this thing, the god of war, but he actually becomes the wise one. He's a broken man who's lived a terrible life, a conqueror, and this, he has these 12 names, and finally ends up as the wise one, father of all. And he has not like commandments, but he has sayings in his life to how to help you. And then he has these 18 charms that are going to heal your life. And the first one is, I know a first. It was called help you. It's called help. It'll help you with accusations and sorrows and all sorts of anxiety, for man is his own worst enemy. That was written down 1,500 years ago. It was probably spoken 3,000 years ago. So those people 3,000 years ago had the same angst and anxieties as we have now. They're not different people, they're the same humans, but just living in a different world. The world we encounter now is different. And what I try and do is look at the wisdom and knowledge of my ancestors through the stories, through the land, through the magic, and to bring magic back into our time. And magic is a really important world because we have to give ourselves permission to believe in it, and then it just starts appearing.
Wow. Yeah. So, you mentioned extraterrestrials there, and I was curious, is there any stories or parts of the traditions which kind of mention contact or that it maybe were influenced by that? It doesn't even have to be in that area, but let me know.
Yeah. So our ancestors believed in 9 realms. We live here in Midgard, which is Middle Earth, just like Lord of the Rings. To one side, above we have ice, below we have fire. To one side we have the realm of the dead, the realm of the gods, the realm of the giants. On the other side we have the realm of the dark elves, the orcs or the goblins. And we have the realm of the green elves, which are fairies, or the She in Ireland, the Twillig Teg in Wales, or the Sealy Court in Scotland. And then we have the realm of the light elves, which the sun beings are angels, cosmic beings, star beings. And they believed those realms existed. They had no problem with it. They lived in a 9-world cosmos. It's only now in this one world where we have a problem with that. And that veil is finished in Glastonbury, where we have all these ley lines converging, we have all these crop circles appearing, that we have an interference pattern between the realms. Do I believe in aliens? Absolutely. Do aliens live in universes far away, or do they live in a different dimension, just a frequency turn? I don't know. But I've experienced alien beings.
Okay, could you tell us about that a little bit?
This is a crazy story. So when I came back to Britain from the States in 2015, and I was working in a shop in Glastonbury, and this woman turned up with a stone for me. She was from Sweden. She said, I've got this stone for you. I said, okay, what do you want me to do? She goes, I want you just to hold it for a month and take care of it. So I just split up with my wife, and I was going for this turmoil. But when I slept with this stone, I slept with a baby, slept like a baby, and I had these really peaceful, tranquil dreams. So I made a little leather pouch for this stone, and I put the pouch in there, stone in the pouch, and I carved some runes on the front of the bag to make it all elaborate. And when she came back, I said, I've got your stone for her. She goes, I don't want the stone, I've got 2 others for you. So now I've got 3 stones. And she said, somebody will come and they'll take you somewhere. I said, okay. And then a woman I knew in town, she said, you've got the stones now. I went, yeah, I've got the stones. She goes, I need to take you somewhere. I said, okay. Okay, this is me now believing in the spirit. Right, where are you going to take me? Off we go. So I've got these 3 stones, and we're walking up a place called Tittenall Hall. It's like Glastonbury Tor, but more remote, about 25 miles away. And as I'm walking up the side of it with this woman, there's some long grass. And at the corner of my eye, I can see these really tall, thin beings with cat-like features. And I'm looking, and she said, you see them, don't you? I said, yeah, I don't want to see them because they're really unsettling me. And I don't want seeing Vikings, but cat beings, that's a bit freaky. And she said, they're called Lyrians, and they're from the star system Lyria. I said, okay. So she took me to the top, and she left me. She said, I'll be back in half an hour. So I sat down there with these stones laid out, and I banged my drum, and I put my meat on and said, what do you want from me? And as I put these 3 stones out, these 3 beings from the grass came and sat in front of each one of them. And I physically couldn't look. I was sort of really disconcerted by it. I thought, I don't work with alien energy. I don't understand it. and then the centre one turned into a mother figure. And she said, "Is this better?" And I said, "Yeah." And then the boy and the girl came either side of them and were looking at me. And she said, "Now the circle's complete." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, it's complete now." I said, "Well, no, it's not. Who's the father?" She said, "You're the father." And she said, "I want you to take these 3 stones and I want you to bury them on Glastonbury tour." So I picked up the stones, the woman returned. I told her what I said. She goes, "Oh, that's exactly what we felt as well. You were going to complete the circle." And I said, "This is a bit out there for me. I don't really believe in this stuff. Give me the runes and King Arthur. This is a bit crazy." But I did what this being said, and I buried him on the tour. And I sat down there, when I sit in the 4th position, it's complete. And on this, I know this is sounding crazy, but so I did that, and I felt like, okay, I don't need to go there again. Within a month, these women from Uppsala had contacted me again and said, "We're raising a dragon energy in Uppsala. It's a feminine energy, and you have to raise the masculine on Glastonbury tour. And there'll be 12 of us in Uppsala, but it will just be you, and you've got to do it." So I said, "Okay, I'll do this." And it was the day I had my date with my new partner. And I said, "I'm going up to raise a dragon on the tour. I'll be back a bit later on." So I did this ceremony, and it took me to the outer cosmos, but I was still attached by a thread. And it was terrifying for me because I don't work without the cosmos. If you ask me to go work with the dead, I'm cool with that. I need dimensions. And I came back and I was shaking. It was really traumatic for me. And then I got a message on my phone from the women upside. She said, "It was beautiful, us, so it must have been bad for you." And I said, "Yeah, it wasn't traumatic." And they said, "We're sending you something in the post to honour the dragon." And they sent me this. It's so heavy. It's a great big lump of iron from a meteorite. She said it's a dragon scale, and it's heavy, you know. Since that time, I have never been back to those 3 stones because it scares the life out of me. You know, I've had altered dimensions. I've spoken with the dead. I've seen different things. I've seen Bigfoot in North America. I used to live in the Pacific Northwest. I've seen Bigfoot in the forest. I believe they're all ultimate, what we call multidimensional beings. So the Bigfoot from North America, they're mentioned many times by the Indians. And wherever you see a totem pole in the Pacific Northwest, the being at the very bottom is a Sasquatch, because it's the guardian. And then you go to Celtic tradition, there's always the great dog that guards the borders between the worlds. In Norse tradition, they have Garm, the great hound that guards the doorways between the worlds. And where these Sasquatches appear, they're the barriers between the worlds, where the vortex is now. They never find a Sasquatch body because they're not of this dimension. They step through, they go back. You know, I remember I was in the Pacific Northwest, and my mother had just died. And I made a bowl with her ashes to do prayers in the forest. And I was speaking to my gods, and Odin said, "Go this way today." So I was walking in the forest, and I was burning mugwort, which is it's like the Celtic version of sage. And I'm just cleansing myself, and a really strange smell came over the forest. And I looked up, and the trees were just going, tsh, 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 falling down one after another. I thought, there must be lumberjacks driving a truck through or something like that. Then my dog started growling, run towards it, yelped, and then disappeared. And I said to him, I just called in spirit. And I said, "Spirit, what is this?" And it just went, "Hide." And I stood back in the hollow of a tree and stood there with the smoke over me. I felt something go by. Then it was silence. So I ran back to the cabin to get my gun because I thought my dog had been attacked. I get to the cabin, my dog's there, cut to pieces and shivering like a leaf. But not cut, it hasn't been attacked, it's just run through everything it possibly could. The dog wouldn't leave the house for a week, it wouldn't even go outside for a week, it was too scared. So I posted this on Facebook about what happened to me. And in 3 private messages, I got 2 from policemen on the 101 and 1 from a hunter who all said I'd been challenged by a Sasquatch because I was going too far close to the vortex. And this happens not just in America, it happens in Britain, it happens in the Himalayas, wherever you look at these places. Then I looked at ley lines, and wherever the ley lines crosses, these vortex happen, these sightings appear. You know, and it's the same with crop circles. We look at crop circles, and I should think, well, they've only appeared to the 70s, so it must be students. Well, I went to see one, and I was in the field 15 minutes before, and then somebody said there's a crop circle there. And I went, no, there's not. I went back, and there's the most elaborate crop circle I've ever seen in broad daylight. And the grass was laid like that, woven into one another. So I started researching crop circles. And they're not a modern phenomenon. They've happened right the way through history, but it used to be known as the devil has sowed your seed. And if that happened in a field and a priest saw it, you were burnt at the stake. So they weren't spoken about, and it was bad luck, and the farmer cut the crops down because people couldn't accept. And all of these crop circles, the authentic ones, there are some inauthentic ones like Sonic the Hedgehog and stuff like that, but they're all fractals, natural patterns that appear in nature. Whether it's a snowflake, whether it's a crop circle, whether it's the pattern on a plant, there's some divine force creating this. But here's a question. I walk people on Glastonbury a lot. That's part of what I do. I walk in with wizards. And I ask them a simple question. Where does the earth stop and we begin? What would you say to that?
It doesn't.
Exactly. We are the earth. We are the living consciousness of the earth. We're able to do as much as we possibly can, but we do the least. Every 7 years, there's not a single atom in my body that's the same. Those carbon atoms go back to the earth. There's no more carbon on this planet than when the world first began, so we've just gone round and round. And our consciousness is an energy as well. And the CERN particle accelerator discovered antimatter, then they discovered string theory, and there's 9 worlds existing at the same time. Hang on, I go back in Celtic and Norse tradition, there's 9 worlds existing at the same time. So it's nothing new. We think it's new, we think we've discovered this, but it's just there in all the stories, hidden in all the tales.
This might be one of the most interesting episodes I've ever done, man. I just gotta say, I'm just fascinated. I'm just listening. It's so interesting to me because, to hear firsthand experience, and I've seen this a lot of the times where people have these experiences, and it's just quite interesting to really dive deep into it. And that's what I also heard in the Pacific Northwest. They have Bigfoot, Sasquatch.
Yeah. I'll tell you the story how I ended up living there. So this is crazy. So I lost everything. I went broke. I lost everything, and my trade was a casino business, and I just found spirit, but I wasn't talking about it. It was personal to me. I thought I'll go to Vegas. I've got friends in Vegas because I'm from the casino trade. I'll get a dog. I'll just pump blackjack for a few years just to get my head back in gear. I went onto the old MySpace. You're probably too young to remember that, are you?
MySpace, dude.
Yeah. And I was putting in Vegas, my friend, but it came up with a woman in Portland, Oregon, who was born on the same day and the same year as me. So I said, nice vintage. Within 3 months, I'm living there. She was a ceramics artist and making clay stuff. And I said, well, I know a bit about the runes, so I'll make the runes out of clay and I'll just start telling stories. So she'd do the market selling her tiles and her pots. And I used to have a cauldron by the side with some runes. And I said, just pick one, I'll tell you what it means. It's just, and bit by bit it turned into grab a handful, drop it all but one, and I'll tell you. I started to be like sort of Harry Potter thing I started wearing a top hat. And it went on, and we were in, I'm trying to think what the town was. We were somewhere around Junction City, Oregon, because I did a big Scandinavian festival there. And this Native American woman came up, and she looked at the runes, and she said, is this medicine? And I said, it's the medicine of my people. I said, but pick one. And she picked up Odin's rune, which is a symbol of, let's see, I'll find Odin's rune while I'm here, so I can show you what it means. It will probably be the last one I turn over. Get those. Okay. So this is Odin's rune. It is a symbol of home, tribe, clan, but also the symbol of Odin, which is the wanderer, the wandering shaman. So she picked it up, and I said, that's a symbol of the wandering shaman. And she said, there are no shaman in my tribe anymore. She said, they've all left. The kids are not interested in medicine or anything. So I said, take that, bury that in your land, and the shaman will return. And I remember giving that to her, and I gave her a hug. I didn't want no money for it. From there, we went down to the Burning Man. Then we went down to, Sebastopol, California. And we ended up all the way the final place we were was about 4 years later. We were in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. And I was allowed to do a stall in the centre of the town with my top hat on and do my runes and tell stories and sell our pendants. By then we'd given up on the tiles. It was all magical stuff we were selling then because it was becoming more and more popular. And either side of me there were two Indians, Jimmy Two Shoes and Jimmy Turtle. And they were both Cherokee Indians, and they kept saying to me, "You're a shaman, man. The way you talk and tell your stories, there's medicine." I said, "Shut up, it's a load of rubbish." And then there was a woman looking through the cauldron, and she was looking for, I said, "That's not the way you do it. You just pick one. Grab a handful, drop all but one, and I'll tell you what it means." And she picked this rune, which is the energy you need to heal. So I said to her, "You've obviously been diagnosed with an illness. Let me put my hands on you and bless you," which I never did. But I put my hands on it, and as I did, about a dozen butterflies landed on my arm and on my hat, and the two Indians are going, "Wow, man, you're a shaman, you're a shaman." I said, "I'm not a shaman." But they went back to the reservation and told the Indians there I was invited to a sweat lodge, which was the most horrific experience of my life, but it sort of let me go of my old self. I never done a sweat lodge since because I hated it. But the medicine man there told me that I had to start trusting my intuition. Whatever I see, I must follow. My wife now is becoming jealous of my spiritual path, thinking it's getting too late. She wants to go back to Portland, Oregon. So we're looking online, and a cabin comes up on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington, about 150 miles north of Portland. 30 miles to the nearest town, 10 miles to the nearest road. So I phone up the estate agent, and my wife said, "Why are you asking this guy about that? It's in the middle of nowhere." I said, "I've got to go there." The Indian said, "I've got to go there." "Why?" I said, "Because when I was 6 years old in London, I told my father I'd be a mountain man. And that's the cabin I saw." So I phoned up the estate agent. He said, "You've got to get there in 2 days, or the woman will be left." And she's a bit crazy, the woman, but she's there for 2 days. She'll show you around the cabin. So I said, "Okay." We're in Arkansas to the Olympic Peninsula. It's like a 1,200-mile drive. We did it in 2 days. We just non-stop drove all the way. We get to the woods as the sun's going down. It's amazing. And as I'm there, I'm feeling, wow, there's something really about home. Like, I've got to be here. This is exactly what I saw in a dream as a kid. As I'm doing this, the sun's shining over my shoulders. I turn around and the woman comes out the cabin. I can't see because the light's shining in my eyes. And she started shouting. Then she stopped dead. And she went, "Oh my God, it's the Rune man. I buried your rune here 4 years ago." So the first Native American woman I gave a rune of Odin where the wandering shaman would return, she buried it in this cabin in the middle of the woods. And 4 years later, I ended up living there out of all the places I could live in the States. And then I knew it's nothing to do with me. It's down to spirit. Spirit, the earth wants us to do this work. You know, like you said, you started doing your podcast on gaming, and all of a sudden now it's taken a completely different way. It's just we're letting people need magic in their lives, especially now more than ever. They need magic in their lives. They need storytelling. They need gathering around the fire. When I walk the land, I tell people, and this is really interesting what Odin said to me. I was very ill about 3 years ago. Actually, no, it's 4 years ago now. And I teach people shamanism all over the world. And they're all sending me healing, and I'm not getting better. And then I got delirious, and then Odin appeared to me. And he said, "You can heal, but you're not a healer. You can read, but you're not a reader." He said, "You have a different gift." I said, "What's my gift?" He said, "When people are with you, just for a moment, they believe in magic. And that's enough." So when I walk people on the land, all I want to do is open the doorway so they can see a light. I don't want to tell them what it is. That's up to them. But to give yourself permission to get out of the rat race and the mundanity and believe in magic, the magic of a sunrise, the magic of a star in the sky, the magic of a cold wave. It's just permission. The world is magical. And we forget that. So that's my quest, to bring magic back to the world.
I mean, we do forget it, 100%. I mean, sometimes, if you're not able to contact other beings, or, a lot of people feel alone because they might not be having experiences. And so, I've felt that way for sure. And so when we think about all these contacts you're making, I'm sure there's going to be people that are like, "Man, how can I get into that? How did that start happening? Is that like a natural thing, or like did you have to do something, or was it just maybe it was your path?" And how do you feel about that?
So traditionally in history, to find the spiritual path, there's only 3 qualifications you need. a wound of the mind, a wound of the body, and a wound of the soul. All three, the threefold death. And then you're ready to open up. Some kids are gifted and just hear it. I was gifted as a kid. My mother was a gypsy. I used to see ghosts when I was a kid all the time. Then I left that all behind, shut that world off, and then lived in the normal world. And in my spare time, I took drugs, I drank, did the most horrible things. That was the way I entertained myself. When I lost all that and all those things fell away, and I had a wound of the mind, the body, and the soul, then spirit reappeared to me. And I do believe these generations after me are finding it a lot easier to access. But it's a strange combination. This is where me and Frank working together worked. So we have these new, younger generations that are far more open to it. And then you need the older guys who are wisdom keepers and just help them give you. So I believe the young should be the presidents and run the world, but with the guidance of the old. The old have lost their interest. They're not here much longer. The young should run the world, and you should have like mentors. Merlin to Arthur. Arthur's a king, but Merlin is his wise counsel. He doesn't have to do what Merlin says, but he's there to counsel him. And I believe there's a happy balance between the two. Whereas now we have this, oh, you're a baby boomer, oh, you're a millennial, oh, you're this, we have nothing in common. You know, we do have a lot in common. We're part of the human race, and we all need to sit around the fire. Black, white, red, green, old and young. And
Yeah, I think that, yeah, for sure. And that has to do with, to me, a lot of the younger generation hasn't taken the hero's journey. Right? They're still kind of in the ordinary world, and they haven't went into the non-ordinary, or sometimes called it spiritual in Joseph Campbell's world, metaphysical called sometimes as well. But if we're not taking that journey, then we're just going to see things very plainly. Whereas I feel like and you can kind of tell when someone has went through the darkness of their own soul, and they've really went through it, and they understand coming out of it, because it's almost as though you can kind of tell some people have this innocence to them. And I think that innocence is just pure for the human at the beginning, because they haven't really taken that path and had these experiences. And then, you know, that's what Joseph Campbell's work is about. For those that don't know that, he wrote A Hero with a Thousand Faces. And basically he found throughout these traditions that there was the same story kept popping up over and over, that they went through this path and they came out on the other side with, sometimes it's called the gem, sometimes it's called the gold, the potion, or the elixir.
Yeah. Or the grail.
And that, right. Or the grail. Yeah. Or these things, you know? And so that's why I think that sometimes the young people think young people are dumb, because a lot of time the people that are making the most noise are the ones that haven't actually taken the journey, because they're too unwilling to look at the unordinary world, and they think they've got it figured out. But I think also we're coming up and we're realizing that just because somebody's talking the loudest doesn't mean they're right, you know?
No, so I live and work in Glastonbury England, which is a very magical place, and everybody there is an outsider. You know, they come from being an outsider so they can all be spiritual in the town, and everyone's trying to be the most spiritual of all the spiritual people, and there's a lot of ego there. There's some people who make an awful lot of money on the spiritual path, and there's some people who are incredibly gifted and authentic who make nothing. Making money has got nothing to do with the spiritual path. Making money's got to be doing a good businessman. Now, if you're lucky to have both. But I know somebody in Glastonbury who's super spiritual, and every morning at dawn they're out there working on the tour, and I see them and they say, and I know they're real, then they go and do their work at KFC, because that just pays the bills. They don't identify themselves as their job. And in the modern world, we're identified as our job, but we're not. And in the modern Western world, most of our shamans and medicine and healers people are locked up in hospitals or depressed, doing something they're not supposed to be, because we give our job our identity. And, you know, I am just what I am. Whether I have to drive a truck to pay the bills, I'll still be a shaman. That's who I am. Whether I make money. Luckily, I've been done well enough to make a reasonable living at what I do. You know, but it's never forget that your job isn't you and spirit, but you alone.
Yeah. So
So I work
spiritual.
with the runes and the Norse. Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I work with the runes, and everything I do is based around the runes. So I'll help and heal people. The runes. Have you heard of the Bosnian pyramids?
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay, so inside the Bosnian pyramids, the Elder Futhark runes are carved. The Bosnian pyramids are 30,000 years old. That means that all written language started in Northern Europe and went south. There are runes on the Sumerian tablets, which are known as the oldest written form. These archaeologists and historians don't want to accept that the Bosnian pyramids are older because it changes all written history. But isn't that our role in life, to search and seek the real truth, not to ignore it because it doesn't fit with our plan? So these runes, the English language comes from. We have, you're an American, you speak the English language, Moon Day, Tears Day, Woden's Day, Thor's Day, Freya's Day. The Norse gods are with us every day of the week, and nobody knows why we call them the Norse gods. You know, why do we call Wednesday? Why do we call Thor's Day today? They don't know. They don't know the origins of it. But the runes were our language, and they were the language of the gods that spoke to all those different dimensions. And each rune represents a time of the year, a plant, a world, much more than just A is for apple, B is for ball. We have A is for answers, B is for beginnings, A is fly agaric, the wild mushroom, to speak to the ancestors because it's the answers, the communication. B is the birch tree, the first tree that grows in the forest. Also, isn't that far more interesting? Isn't that far more rich in history than what we're taught? You know, and it's not that I believe it should just be taught, but give people the option. Don't hide it away. And I believe that magic is rising again. You can see it in the TV shows, the Game of Thrones, the Harry Potter, and then we've got the Last Kingdom and the Viking series. There's a great awakening of this in our DNA, because that's where our ancestors live, in our DNA.
Yeah, and did you see the new Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power? Have you seen that at all?
I did see that. Some of I like all of those stories. I like the Game of Thrones. I love it. You know, but once again, it's an archetypal story. Jon Snow is the archetypal hero. The historical ones that pretend to be real history, they really frustrate me, because, like the Viking series and the Last Kingdom. Last Kingdom's much better than the Viking series. The Viking series just changes heroes, changes history, and then calls it history. Now, I know my ancestors should be honoured and tell the true story. And it's just as exciting to tell the true story as to make it. I don't understand that. And so, because I want to honour my ancestors, well, they're one of the things. The land, my gods, my ancestors.
Okay, so now I gotta ask, because I've been asking every guest that came on, have they seen Rings of Power? And you're the first one that has. So, with all the history, the knowledge that you know, in the first couple episodes, I don't really think this is a spoiler because it's part of the main plot. Yeah. Very much at the beginning, there's a meteor that comes down, and there's a dude in the meteor, and he ends up being a wizard, right? Do you see that throughout history at all? Is there meteor men or that type of thing that happens? Like when we think about Merlin or these other ancient wizard or sorcerer archetypes, do you think that's something that came from a meteor, or is that something that they just came into incarnation with that gift? Or?
So this is where we come into this 9 worlds theory. So we've got these 9 different worlds, and there's an aspect of us that dwells in each one. This is where the string theory comes in, and antimatter. Us doing this here, something else must be happening very similar in one of the other worlds, or in all of the other worlds, or we don't exist. That's just pure physics. Now, these beings that come into our world from other dimensions, there's terminology called walking. So some people they say, like, I'm an alien. I don't feel right in this world. It doesn't feel right to me. Well, yeah, you're probably more likely to live with the light elves. It doesn't feel right to you. But then sometimes there's those light elves people that come into our world to make a change. And in the Lord of the Rings, they're saying that, like, Gandalf is one of the light elves, comes in and he evolves and becomes a white wizard to do their work. There's been many of those white wizards through history. This is interesting. So Christ, when he was 12 years old, was brought to Glastonbury. Then he wasn't seen again until he was 33. Then he started his mission. Well, the Druids used to come to Glastonbury. It was like the high steps from the Game of Thrones. You would come and you would study for 21 years. 7 years you'd listen to the stories. For 7 years you would study the stories. And then for 7 years you would tell the stories over and over again, so that it was like waters off a duck's back to you. So Christ came and did this and became a Druid, which means tree-wise, and then went out on his mission. And those beings that became Druids came from all over the land and all over the world to study there. Do you know what the ultimate honour of a Druid was? When he became a Druid, was to have the threefold death, to be strangled, have his throat cut, and forced into the water. So you give your knowledge back to the land. That was the greatest gift you could do, because they see no difference between us and the land. So if somebody's coming from a star being into the earth, that's a gift, somebody from another dimension coming in. We just have this really weird concept that it's just us. When you're dead, do the most you can in this life. There's multiple worlds going on at the same time. When my mum died, this is just, once again, this is my truth, my experience, my truth. People can say I'm as mad as a box of frogs, that's cool. She died and she started appearing to me in shamanic dreams and started showing me stuff and things that came completely true, and helping clients. She'd tell me to get in touch with a client and things were happening. And every time I saw her, she was younger and healthier. I said, Mum, why every time I see you, are you younger and healthy? She said, oh my God, you're so stupid sometimes. I said, what? She goes, in your world, you get older and older until you die. In this world, we get younger and younger until we're born again. And it just made perfect sense to me. And then I went and studied it. And actually, even Einstein said there's one of the dimensions where time rolls backwards. And I thought, well, that makes sense. You have these kids who are born, remember their death from the previous life. There's more magic in our world than there is in all the universes. It's just frequencies and dimensions, and that's all we are, as a frequency. And each one of these rooms I've worked with, each one is a frequency, and when you chant it, you open those doorways to those different worlds and dimensions. It's a big subject to get into in like an hour, but
I get it, man. I mean, yeah, there's a lot to it. I mean, it's thousands of years of traditions. You know?
Yeah, and it's all stored up in different traditions, and we all have to work together. Will we ever get the riddle? Not sure. There was the last period of what we call the Great Awakenings was the 1150s. There was a guy called Chrétien de Troyes, a woman called Hildegard of Bingen, and these were mystics. They had this great enlightenment and unstarted understanding. That's when the Arthurian legends were first written, as we know them. They were first mentioned by a guy called Gildas, a monk, who's actually, I can see his monastery out my window on a place called Steepholm. But Chrétien de Troyes first put down those Arthurian romances in 1155. But every time there's this great awakening, there's also this great sinking back. So at the same in the world as the moment as we are rising up spiritually and feeling, wow, this great, brave new world, and we can be these spiritual beings, you see all this other darkness happening around us, trying to put us down, because it's imbalance. But we have to do that. That's our role. That's our job. That's our quest, to try and be the light in the world. And whether you do it by working with angels, or you work it with Vikings, or you're working with goblins or fairies or the dead or gods, we must keep on that path. And we must be the light for others to be drawn to.
What do you think is your thoughts on what's going to happen in the next 15 years? You think it's going to just keep getting up, or you think when you look at the world, some people say it's going to get worse, some people say it's going to get better. I'm actually one that thinks that I think this is kind of the design of the world, in the sense that it seems like this game is kind of designed to be, there's villains, there's heroes, and it's kind of like forging that, Yeah.
That hero story, there's always heroes and villains. You can't be a hero unless there's a villain. There's nobody, you need your counterpart, you need your nemesis. And we're always going through that learning story. Me personally, I'm spiritual, but I believe the biggest awakening in the world that's happening is cryptocurrency. It is going to reevaluate wealth and how it's distributed. And it's the young that understand it. The old paradigm of the old bankers don't get it. And the kids I'm an old guy and I work with cryptocurrency. I'm rare for somebody of my age. I'm 59. That's rare for somebody to be understanding it. But I get it. I love maths. I've come from the casino world, so I love all the the maths around it, yeah, it sets the common man free. And that's what we want. We want to be independently free, because at the moment, it doesn't matter whether you call it a mortgage or you were bought as a slave owner. You work for somebody else to pay somebody else's bills. Only technology can set us free.
And then
sorry, go on.
Go ahead.
Yeah, they're not happy with accepting it, that it will change the dynamic. But that is the future. It's been invented. It can't be invented. Be uninvented.
Yeah, you mentioned Frank earlier, and I had Frank on this podcast probably like six or seven episodes ago, and he was talking about organic technology, because you're saying technology will save us.
Yeah.
When you think about organic technology and the power we have within, gifts that humans have within, what do you think are some things that are lying dormant that we're not accessing right now for most people?
Well, I don't believe everybody is a shaman, but I believe everybody can live a shamanic lifestyle, to be in harmony with the world, the planet, and start feeling the consciousness. Because like I said, we're the living consciousness of the planet. It doesn't end where our feet stop. Who owns the world? The birds, the grass, the worms? No, we're all part of the same organism that goes on. And when we start tapping into that, tapping into the earth to heal us, the earth to feed us, the earth to nurture us, and not get away from the conflict between us, one another, whether the overlords or whatever you want to, because there's always been overlords since the beginning of time. That's just part of the human condition. This is another spiritual experience I had with some standing stones. My friend brought a wood down in Cornwall, and he's brought this wood, and it's got a standing circle in it, a stone circle in it, and it's got these trees with ancient carvings on it. He went, oh yeah, I'm going to knock them all down with an earth mover. I said, you can't do that. These have been here since Neolithic times. Can I go and sit there? He said, so I spent the night in the stone circle, and I was drumming and chanting, and my partner was with me. She fell asleep. And then this being appeared out of the stones. And it was a perfect human, but just shorter than us. And I was saying, who are you? And she goes, oh, you're a Grelig. I said, what's a Grelig? She goes, a Grelig is a Jotun. A Jotun in the old language is a giant. She said, but Greligs, because obviously anyone who's bigger than them is going to be a giant. So these little beings who mean no harm and live in the stones, they were like a frequency being. And they said, you're a Grelig. And I said, what's a Grelig? Greligs have one fault. They never learn from their mistakes. And you can't help it. You're a Grelig. That's your curse. So are we ever going to get it right? I'm not sure. I think we'll be playing the same dance forever. That's how the other beings see us. We're Greligs. No matter how good we get it, we always mess it up. Maybe every now and then, one of us will get to be like a meteor to one of the other worlds where they've got it right. Like the guy he came as a meteor into this world. And if you think every life that's existed, a human life that exists on the planet, has been one of 200 million sperm. One of them just makes it in. So is that the same miraculous into the new world? That we're a Messiah in our own right, then every one of us will be Messiah going to another world. Who knows? But I know us as the human condition always seem to mess it up.
What do you think messing it up is?
So this is where we go back to the Hobbit, the original Hobbit story. In Britain, we have St. George. What I was taught at school is that St. George and the dragon, St. George slays the Islamic dragon to save the Christian princess. That is a Christian story that was put on the original story, which is the same as the Hobbit. The dwarf king wants more and more gold, until eventually Smaug the dragon comes. And then the dwarf king becomes the dragon, sits on the gold, wants more and more, and then it becomes the cursed gold. So the slaying of the dragon was slaying greed. When you do away with greed, Greligs or humans can learn, but we have this innate greed in us that just wants to have more and more. We don't care if the three people down the road are starving. We've got enough food for me and you can't have any, which is such a bizarre system, because in the world, most of that food goes off before we can eat it, and the people starve down the road. Until we can master that dragon, the dragon of greed, we can't evolve properly. And if you look at the world at the moment, the dragon rules. That dragon of greed rules everything. The 1% has 99% of the money. That cannot be right.
Mm-hmm.
But we need them to see, them to master the dragon, because it's not us, the I suppose the 99% that need to master the dragon. It's the 1%. The 1% needs to understand that greed controls you. You don't control greed.
I think that's what the law of one. I don't know if you've heard of the law of one or the law of one material.
Yeah.
So I've done a ridiculous amount of videos on it, and one of the biggest concepts in the law of one is that there's polarity in our dimension, or our density as they call it. And you're either, at all times, you're either polarizing service to self, which would be 95% or more in service to yourself, or you're polarizing 50% or more in service to others. And the percentages don't matter, because that's to get into the next one. But really, it's about, there's basically two types. There's a north and a south. There's a service to self or service to others. And really what you're saying is that the service to self are really being in service to themselves. And so is that ever going to change? I don't know. Is there ever not going to be any Sith? I don't know.
It's, what we can do is strive. That's the purpose. We strive. We strive to be an example, to show them a different way. For me, my quest is not only to show people that, but also to show people to remember who we are. Those ancestral stories, just like Lord of the Rings, when you watch it, it wakes something inside you.
It does.
The original Tolkien's, were, I believe he channeled them, because those are the stories of the Anglo-Saxons. You have the giants, you have the goblins, the orcs, you have the green elves, the fairies, and you have those light elves, those higher beings. They're all there in that story. And you have Middle-earth, and you have the Merlin figure, or Odin, which is Gandalf, the wandering shaman. All of those things are there. And we see it and we wake up, because not only is it the origins of the Anglo-Saxon people, it's the origins of the Germanic people and the Celtic people. The Celts originated from Holstein, Germany, on the borders of Germany and Denmark. Their goddess was named Danu. The river Danube runs through Germany, all the way through Europe, and they travelled to Britain and Ireland. That's where they finished off. But that culture, we've got the Stone Circle people. They were like 3,000 years before. Who were they? This is where we have the Bosnian pyramids, 30,000 years ago. Who were they, those guys? Until we get our scholars not deciding that they are the greatest scholar on what they know, and still trying to research, because we have far more technology now to show us deeper things, we can't learn. Because if those people are blocking it for anything to be accepted, how can we learn who we really were? How can we learn from the mistakes and the knowledge of our ancestors if we hide it because it doesn't fit with their control?
You're going to make me go do it myself, aren't you?
We've got to do it.
I've always been interested in it. And, honestly, this podcast is very inspiring to me to begin to talk about that more, and talk about ancient civilizations and history, because I really do think that when we understand the history of what it was and why certain things are the way they are, like I did a podcast, it's not out yet, but by the time when this comes out, this conversation today, it'll have been the podcast I did with Todd, and I talked about how there was a time period where the Roman Catholic Church and basically Christianity, in a sense, wouldn't allow you to really talk about anything else. And so it's not that these traditions aren't correct or that they were worse than the more popular ones. It's that you literally you were not looking good for your future in terms of staying, nice and healthy, you could say, if you talked about certain things. And so that's one thing I like to remind people of. It's like, just because you see a bunch of churches and you don't see people talking about this, doesn't mean that it's not because it was less believed in. I think there was a time period where, what you're talking about is everyone knew this, or not everyone, but many, many people. It was the culture. And we're just in a different time period where certain things happen to where that's not as popular, but it's still profound, and it explains so many things,
Yeah, so in my country, in Britain, the church has controlled a lot of the history. Wherever there was a sacred site, they stick a church on top of it. The real Merlin was a character called Necton. In Cornwall, we have St Nectan's Glen, one of the most magical places in the world, but they don't call it Merlin's Glen because Merlin was a title. They changed his name to Saint Nectan, made him Christian. Within a generation, they just see him as a Christian. Odin had a son. So we know Christ was born in April because In America, you pay your taxes in April. In Britain, we pay our taxes in April because of the Romans. So Joseph was going to Bethlehem to pay his taxes. But Odin had a son called Balder, the god of love and peace. And he was born on winter solstice. But he didn't cry out for 3 days. And on the 24th, he cried out and the Sun King was born. So Odin was so happy he gave all the children presents. And Balder, the god of love and peace, with long blonde hair, blue eyes and a goatee beard, became the sun god, the most beautiful son of Odin, who had no weapons, just a shield to protect people. But then he was killed, and he lives between the world, and they're waiting for him to be resurrected. And his symbol is mistletoe, because it lives between the two worlds. It doesn't grow on the ground, and it doesn't grow in the sky. It never touches the ground. And at Christmas, we hang mistletoe up, and we still kiss under it to this day. And we don't know why we do it, but it's the origins of Balder, the son of Odin. Now, these are things that we still do, and it's the origins. Why don't they teach us the origins of these traditions? You know, there's such a vast knowledge in it. And when we watch The Lord of the Rings, The Game of Thrones, we're craving this knowledge because it feels like, fireside stories, tell me the story. That's what my initiation, the next initiation is on the 9th of October, which is an initiation into Avalon, to understand that there's 7 guardians of the Grail. And each episode I tell stories. We'll work with that guardian and we'll cast runes and go on a journey led by the runes. I have no idea where you're going. I draw my chart and each person will experience it, and we'll talk about it when we come back. But the 7 guardians of the Grail are the struggle and the strife, the hound, the swan, the hawk, the lament, and the shield itself. So we go through all these guardians and we experience them in the journey, and finally we get to whatever the grail is to you. It's different to different people. But it allows you to step past out of your body and start. That's what we want to give, is be able to give people their permission to go into that magical realm.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether it's Tolkien stepping out of his mind and seeing all the world of Lord of the Rings and the Hobbits and seeing that came from his mind, or did he channel it from the other dimensions? J.R. Martin, did he come from his mind, or was he just told to be a storyteller? I believe being a storyteller is the best thing you can be. And to tell stories that people remember, that inspire them. So it comes with responsibility to honour the ancestors and what actually happened. Yeah. And that's what I'm going to share with you. I don't know when's this podcast going to go out?
It's probably gonna be, I have one I'm gonna put out probably tomorrow, then I have one on the 7th, probably the 14th.
Right, okay, so it's going to miss my next initiation, and so I'll have to send you some other stuff for my next room class and stuff in January.
Okay, that's the soonest that it's going to be?
Yeah, but so there's 6 weeks initiations, so if I did start one on the 9th of October, it'll take us up to 9th of November, just before Christmas.
Okay. Well, I want to, I want people to get access to this because...
Yes, so we'll put it for the 9th. I'll send you the link, put it out, and then if they miss the first episode, they can it's all recorded anyway, they can watch it, And you're welcome to join yourself.
I could just double it up next week, if that's what... I'll put out.
That'd be great if you could.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll get this out beforehand.
Yeah, if you think it's worthy content.
I mean, this has been one of the most fascinating episodes I've ever done. So yes,
cool. That's cool.
I do think it's worth it. To be honest, I'm interested myself because I'm just like, I'm inspired right now. I want to go make a bunch of videos about history and learn and research, and that's when I get inspired. I just kind of follow that when I get inspired and when I talk to people. I love doing this podcast because really opens me up to things that a lot of people aren't talking about, and sometimes the people that are talking about profound things, you just don't hear about it because it's just not getting the attention that I think it deserves. And that's part of what I do on this podcast is I find people that are interesting. I try to let people, because you know what, the way that I found you was through someone else.
Yeah.
Frank mentioned you to me, and it's just incredible. I mean, I want to come to the UK myself, and I want to figure that. I want to go travel around.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, and I think I said before the podcast, I haven't been outside the US yet, but I think that's part of my next part of my next
Why
chapter of my
not?
life. What's that?
Why not? Why haven't you left the US yet?
Well, for I was when I was a child, parents got divorced early, and we didn't have much money growing up. We never traveled. Neither of my parents ever traveled outside the U.S. I don't even think either of my parents have. It was just not a thing really in our family. And then growing up,
So
I
whereabouts you
started,
live in the States?
what's that?
Whereabouts are you
What,
based in the States now?
right now, I'm in Texas. I was born in Florida,
Okay.
and I was in Michigan for a while, but I've been traveling nomadically for like the last 2 years and just going around. And so we didn't have enough money growing up, and that's
Where
one reason. What's that?
Yeah. You're in Austin?
Yeah. hmm
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. So
So
you didn't have enough money. It's you just have to give yourself permission. That's all it is. It's just like open the doorway to magic. Give
I
yourself
know
permission.
I've been working on it, man. I decided to just kind of hunker down, and I got a dog, the dog who was going crazy earlier, and I didn't have anybody in the time period where I thought about moving to Hawaii for a little bit, but it's really hard to get a
Yeah.
dog to Hawaii. I actually haven't been to Hawaii either. I'm gonna go to Hawaii in hopefully in February for a little while, but yeah. So when it comes to why, I think the main reason is that I've just been trying to get myself to a place where I could do this full time. Because I worked jobs. I was like, for those that don't know, I was detailing cars for a year with my brother on the side to just kind of support, like you're saying, while I was following this path, kind of getting myself. And I've just been fortunate enough in the past probably 2 to 3 months to get myself to the point where I can do this full time. And that was actually due to my book. I put my book
Yeah.
out, and enough people got the book where, hey, I can actually just focus on what I really want to do. So I think it's just a natural byproduct of given enough time that I put out things, and I'll have that, and so
So what you
it's
said,
getting to the
I'll
time.
plug my book. I've got my book here. I'll plug it.
Hey man, let's see
So
it.
here's my book.
Raising the Runes.
Raising a Shamanic Journey through Avalon. It's actually
Very nice.
was
Is it on
really-
Amazon?
Yeah, I've met one of my. Sorry.
Is it on Amazon?
Yeah, it is on Amazon. Yeah, and it's really weird. I mean, I think I've made much money out of the book, but it's been a great promotional tool. So
Mhm.
one of my clients I said, I got your book. I said, where'd you get it from? She said, I got it from Walmart. I said, what? My book's for sale in Walmart? And they said, yeah. I thought, I've never made any money out of that book. Right? I think if somebody buys it off Amazon, I'll make about 14 cents. But the most important thing is the story gets out there.
Yeah.
So my book, there's lots of swearing in it. There's funny stories. It's written like a comic because I wanted a truck driver to read it and laugh.
Nice.
Because we have that big barrier between spirituality and masculinity. Oh, you can't be spiritual, you're a man. So I want to tell the story of how it happens for me, and I want people to laugh about it and not sort of get about, because we got to laugh at ourselves. What I do for a living and how I live my life. I'm a shaman. I'm a wizard. That's crazy. That's completely nuts. And I don't mind laughing at myself because I don't take myself too serious, because the spirit can take it away as quick as it can. So we're supposed to be humble. And
For sure.
what was your book about?
What's my book about? My book's
Yeah.
about, you actually kind of hit on, it's about a lot of the quantum physics and many worlds. I talk about many worlds in there, and talk about the quantum field, and it's about the subconscious mind. It's about basically empowerment. I mean, I wrote the book with basically two goals in mind: that if you read the book, you would empower yourself to really start to get a hold of your life perceptually, and start to feel good and empowered. And then secondly, to understand the nature of things, and to understand the Eastern traditions. I wrote a whole chapter on reincarnation, and how in the Bible that reincarnation may have actually been in the Bible, but it just kind of got taken out for whatever reasons. I talked about actually the history of reincarnation and all that, and all the evidence of people like Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia, where he went around and found thousands of kids that could remember their past life.
Yeah.
So talked about that. I talked about the sun, solar cycles, how that has to do with human activity, particle physics, and how basically the different reactions of the sun also affect us. And yeah, a lot of that. And I did a chapter on consciousness evolution and enlightenment in many cultures, what that means. I'm not trying to tell people what enlightenment is, like I've achieved it, because I haven't, but I just find it really fascinating to explore, like, what are the highest levels of consciousness that people have reached, like in Buddhism and Hinduism
Yeah.
and different non-dual traditions. So that's a lot of what the book's about.
So I've studied the northern traditions. I'm not very up on Eastern traditions, but there's a thing called Uttasiddhi, which is a northern tradition in Celtic and Norse tradition, where you just sit outside and become as the ice. And only when you're completely still can you really see the true reality of consciousness. When the animals see you as part of the forest, then you start seeing the world as it truly is. We're always rushing, but it boils down to me that I'm no separate from the earth. I am the earth. And I used to ask these questions when I was a kid, even before I was spiritual, If I imagine myself in the Bahamas sitting on the beach, am I there or have I just imagined it? What's the difference?
Right. I hit on that too.
Yeah.
What the power that takes within it. But you actually said something that was quite fascinating, and I want to talk about it. With when we think about this concept of men and the spiritual path, and that it's kind of frowned upon, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what is the history behind why it's kind of like that? Why men why it's portrayed as very masculine and spirituality is kind of dumb, or it's because I feel that too. There's a lot of women are tapped in, and that's great.
Yeah.
And I think that there's some good amount of men that are, but not nearly as much. And I know that has to do with the feminine, but what are your thoughts?
I would say it's about 1% of the male population that's interested in doing this, and they're probably quite embarrassed by it because being spiritual is seen as a weakness. Now, I teach this in my shamanic path. Men are naturally warriors. Some men aren't, but most men are naturally warriors. And women are naturally nurturers. Some women are warriors, but most women are nurturers. We're opening up to a world where we're all becoming empathic, which is actually the woke society, but it's not a productive world. You can be too woke and you can feel everything and you can't even function in the world. This is part of the spiritual aspect we're getting with the divine feminine. They're nurturers, so they feel all the pain. But warriors are detached. They're not empaths. You can't be a warrior if you feel your enemy's pain. So when you're a little boy and you're pulling the legs off spiders, you don't know why you're doing it, but you're feeling nothing for the spiders, but the little girls are going, oh my God, poor spider, because the women nurture. And if we don't understand that the warrior path has to be a quest, has to be, this is my king and I'll follow him to the end, which is, for me as a man, that's what I've searched for my whole life. Who is my king I am willing to stand on the battlefield and die for? And the feminine will go, oh, that's a bit crazy. There's an innate thing in all men that feel that because we're naturally warriors. Men, women can give birth to a child. Most men would die dealing with that much pain. But man can have his arm chopped off, pick it up and carry it to the doctors and put it back on. We're built differently. And this is very much about the spiritual path. You have to make it accessible to the men. Now, I know in the world, at the moment, the young men are lost. Most of the men I find on the spiritual path have a feminine aspect to them because most of your clients are feminine and you're trying to get on them. But even those men crave to be warriors and want to find the sword and the axe, and these are tools, the tools of a warrior. So they empower me. I'm not afraid to say, that's my sword, there's my axe. I am a warrior and I am willing to die in battle for the people I love. But the young boys who are coming through, when I go and sit in the forest with them, they get it. And they love hearing the warrior stories. And they want to quest, they want to strive to protect the divine feminine. But now live in a world where the divine feminine wants its certainty. It doesn't want men to protect it. Well, where's the role for the warrior then? Who are they supposed to protect? They need to protect the family, the tribe, the clan, the land. But if you take that right away from them, they're lost. So instead, they start following role models like Andrew Tate, who's a misogynist and just says things because the boys have lost their place in the world. And we have to find a happy medium where it's okay to be a warrior, but it's okay to be spiritual as well. And I don't know how to do it, I'll be honest, because 95% of the people who sit down in front of me are feminine or women, you know. And I'm honoured that they sit and listen to me. Because some I've come across don't like listening to a man. How can you be spiritual? You're a masculine man. But once they hear me speaking and my authenticity, my path, they understand that this energy is needed in the spiritual world. But I really at a loss to find how you get guys into it.
It's interesting.
Yeah,
I haven't thought about it.
You know, you'll get guys join a Viking society in Vinland and want to be Vikings and want to join that society and beat the life out of each other with wooden swords just the right to get in, because that's a warrior mindset. But to get them to be, are men all supposed, we all supposed to be empaths? So this is in Norse tradition. They believe your soul is in your belly. It's called your gidya, your moral compass. You don't even need right and wrongs. Your stomach tells you when something's innately right and wrong. So you just trust your gidya. And women have a gidya as well. But at a time of war, you have to switch that off. And then you use a coin, which has got the wolf and the raven on it. If you're a wolf, you go to battle and you don't think about it. You think if it's a raven, you fly above or fly away and use wisdom. You haven't got all these options. You've got a single choice you've got to make. And in a time of war, you have to be a warrior. An empath will die. And this is, if you look at the Ukraine, those guys who are fighting in the Ukraine, they are not empaths. They cannot be. They couldn't function as a warrior if they were. After the battle's over, they can show mercy and heal. But the spiritual world we have is so heavily weighted towards empathic people, feeling the pain, feeling the sorrow of the world. That doesn't appeal to the masculine. You know, I came from a world that was quite a violent world, you know. And I understand those guys. And I wish I could show them some peace. Because they've got weights hand they never talk about, you know. And most of the people who commit suicide are young men under the age of 25. Because they feel their emotional things as a weakness. They're the stories. They're the guys I want to get sitting in a circle around like this and go, well, that old guy, he doesn't seem super feminine. He doesn't seem like he's just spiritual weak. He's got an energy to him. I want to get to those guys. And it's hard to get to them.
Mm-hmm.
And what's your audience? What ratio have you got? Do you know what ratio it is?
I think it depends on what platform. If I had to take a look, I could probably tell you pretty quickly. I haven't looked in a while. I don't tend to look at analytics very much because I'm just like, it is what it is. And whoever wants to follow me can. I don't know. Does it even tell me on Instagram anymore? Let me see. Okay. So it's actually 54% men.
Wow.
And 45% women. For those that think I'm BS, and I'm going to show the camera.
Yeah, that's impressive.
So my men are here. Shout out to Muhammad.
Cool.
Out of 110,000, we got 54% men. Nice.
That's cool. That's brilliant.
Yeah, so we're here. I think for me, I almost see the world as, I completely agree with you that there's in the past we have had to be warriors, and it's almost like we're transitioning from a physical world to a mental world. And I think when we no longer have that constant threat of war upon us, maybe we can start to tap into that more. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be prepared, because I think there can also be a balance. That's why you see the Shaolin monks, they're prepared. Yeah. They're prepared for battle. They stay prepared. Yeah. That's why you see martial arts. And so we can still have this side to us. If we need to turn it on, we can turn it on. Yeah. But we can also tap into this other side of reality at times. And I think that's almost like what we find with the different archetypes. You know, you have the wizard, and you have the warrior, and you have you might have the archer. You might have different. There's many, and I think that's what tarot explores. And I think that, has tarot been around in Northern culture, or is that? I feel like runes is kind of like tarot, but it's different, and it has to do with.
So runes are much older than the tarot. The tarot come from about the 15th century, but it's exactly the same. So I can cast 3 runes, and they'll show me a picture. They'll be upside twisted, and they'll show me a different picture. So I see the rooms like the tarot. They show me a whole card of a whole event of things going on. But that's only because I've been studying them an awful lot of time. You know, to the average person, they're just letters of this means this means that. You know, prime example of something. So there's a rune called Dagaz. Okay, so it looks like a butterfly. It's a rune of change. It's a dawning of a new time. It can be like that. It looks like an hourglass, limbo. But it's also the world of the light elves. It looks like angels' wings. And when you throw it down, it can be any of those things combined with the other ones. And that's where the pictures. So I teach my students when I teach the runes. So the initiation is different, but I do rune classes probably every 6 weeks, teaching people the runes. And then I teach them to look at it like a picture. What's it trying to tell you? We were doing a class the other day. It's about the third class, and we were just doing random questions. And I wanted a girl to ask a question, and she just said, it spelled a letter, it spelled a name. And I said, who's June? She said, what? I said, who's June? She said, that's my grandmother who's just passed over. I said, that's really cool. She wants to speak to you. So and then I used the runes as a medium for her to speak directly with her grandmother. And she said, how did you do that? I said, well, not only have you got to learn the runes, you've got to learn to read them. So there's so much information that's there, but it has to be learned. Whereas in the tarot card, the image is already there for you. But with the 24 runes, in multiple combinations, in multiple throwing them in different ways, there's a vast array of pictures that are available to you. And there's no two ever the same. The likelihood of it happening are crazy. But it just shows you stuff straight away. So that they are like the tarot, but it's a gift you have to learn. Well, it's not a gift, it's a skill you have to learn. To see past just what's it saying, then it shows me something more.
Yeah, do you think in the northern traditions, in the northern traditions, are there, like if we're using the runes, so basically are we saying that there's a force that will move the runes in order to give us a kind of an answer to, is it a question-based thing? Because I've never worked with runes, so I'm just trying to understand exactly how that works.
If I was sitting with you, if I was giving you a rune reading online, maybe we'll do that in a live class. I'll give you a rune reading online. And basically what happens, you'll pick 9 numbers between 1 and 24. I'll pick them up and shake them. I'll do a chant to connect us and open us up to spirit beforehand. And then you'll tell me when to throw them. And as I throw them, that is the story of your life. And I'll tell you what I see. I don't want to know any questions. I'll tell you what I see in the runes. This is what's going to happen. The past, the present, and the future. If we don't change anything, we can change the runes. The difference with the tarot is you can't. I can get you to work with this rune, to wear it around your neck, to bring that back into balance, because this is out of balance. Once we've done that, then we then start asking questions, and then the runes will speak directly to you. And I step aside. I am psychic. I do work with that energy, but I let the runes do the talking. I trust them implicitly. And what they say, I say. Whether it's good or bad, it's what I say. I had a woman come to see me, and she was only about 33 years old. She was very attractive, and she wanted to know, should she go to Hungary and pay $40,000 for cancer treatment? And I looked, and I cast the runes, and they showed me something. I said, I'm going to tell you exactly what they're saying. No, you're wasting your money. Leave your money for your boys. And she said, well, I'm still going to fight. I said, I can only tell you the truth, and I'm really sorry. And I gave her a rune called Radar, which to help you on your journey no matter what. 6 months later, her husband came back and see me and said, my wife died. He said, I want to shake your hand. I said, what? He said, because you were the only spiritualist we went to who said it wouldn't work. Everyone else gave her false hope. And now I'm still friends with that man now, and his boys come and talk to me, and I give them necklaces. And I said, what you got to remember, life is orlog. It's a book. Some books are long, some books are short. When you come to the last page, you come to the last page. Doesn't mean it's the end. It's just the end of that story. There's another story waiting for you. But don't ask the questions if you don't want the answer, because I will tell you the truth for the runes. And it's your responsibility to do that. You're asking spirit to guide us on our journeys. We're tapping into the web of weird, the cosmic fibers that link all things. There's 3 goddesses called Erd, Verdandi, and Skuld. They weave the web of time, past, present, and future, and even the gods in Asgard have to bow down to them. It's like our destinies are already written. Just like me ending up in the forest in the Pacific Northwest working with the Chinook Indians. That was foretold when I was a child. I just didn't understand it. And only because I started following my destiny and trusting my intuition did I end up there. And then it's nothing to do with you. You just want to. And the amount of times I've been willing to give up this path because I could make a lot more money in the casino business than I can do in this. And every time I do, something happens to put me back on this path because they know they don't want me to do that.
And when you say they don't want you to do that, who are you referring to?
Well, to me, it will be Odin and my gods and my ancestors. They know I believe I was a shaman before, and every time I find my way back to this place. And this is what I'm supposed to be doing in this time. And the land, my gods, my ancestors don't want me to go off this path. Or Mother Earth herself has found me and put me on this path. And if I try and go off, she'll do something and push me back on.
Okay.
I could go on with stories and stories and stories.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I got 2 more questions for you then, man.
Yeah, sure.
So you're on the Universe the Game podcast. So I got to ask you, do you feel like there's aspects of reality that are like a game? Have you seen in history where maybe the universe or there's different parts of life that might be a game and how that would work?
So I have experiences. I'm a gamer myself. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I love. It's
nice.
And the magic in that is accurate. The people who did their research in that have got the magic and everything right. But the first time I experienced games and the reality coming together, I was in a shop in Vancouver, Washington, and I didn't have any Wi-Fi in there, so I downloaded my grandson's survival craft onto my iPad. Right. And I'm looking at this. My spiritual animal is a polar bear. There's a polar bear behind me on the shelf there, and then the polar bear came on the screen and said, "It's there." And I looked at it and I said, "Oh, you got a message for me?" Because I actually built a whole replica of my magical world in England on Minecraft. So I had Stonehenge, I had Glastonbury tour, I used to travel around, and the polar bear said, "Beware the werewolf." I said, "What do you mean beware the werewolf?" And I said, "Do you mean beware?" And they went, "No, be aware of the werewolf." Okay. And at this point, I hadn't seen a werewolf on Minecraft. So then the moon came out. I hadn't played it for long. Then this completely black werewolf came up and was standing in front of me. And I said, "What do you want?" And I was looking at it thinking, there must be a message I have for the werewolf. And I looked out from the store and there's this great big black guy standing in front of me in the store saying, "What is this shop?" I said, "Well, it's called Tribe. It's the origins of Celtic and Norse tradition." And he went to a picture that I just painted. And he said, "Who is this woman?" I said, "Well, I only painted that yesterday." He goes, "I saw that woman in a dream last night." I said, "What was your dream?" And he said, "I was laying on the ice and I was freezing and this woman turned up with a basket and she had this fruit and she fed me and I instantly fell in love with her." And I said, "Brother, that's the goddess of Duna. She's the goddess of immortality and she has the apples of immortal life. And she brings you back. She brings heaps of gods young. And her husband is Bragi, the poet of the gods, who tells the stories and sings the songs." And he went, "Man, I'm a rapper." And I gave him the picture because it just happened and that had happened in the Minecraft image. Tell me that. And so I think that I actually believe that games like Minecraft, where there is no beginning, no end, I've been doing live streams. I tried to do something years ago when I was doing a live stream. I was doing a live meditation, drumming in the forest in Glastonbury. And Kelly, my partner, said, "We can't post that. You need to hear the voices that are coming through while you're doing that." And there was and I looked up because I felt a troll was coming out of the forest. And we played it back and there's this thumping and troll sound and people screaming. But okay, you can't play that. Because people only want a bit of glimpses between the world. They don't want too much. It's terrifying for them. So I think spirit comes in through games and shows us stuff through games to give us wisdom. I've had spiritual experiences in Red Dead Redemption, the cowboy game, and once again I played Valhalla just to chill out.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, Valhalla's great for guys to learn because it's a warrior's path. You're a warrior on a quest.
Right.
And guys love games like that. I think people are tapping into that dimension, the internet, the 3D web. We're just tapping into, in Norse they call it, so we have these 9 worlds, but we have this world called Frithgar. Frith is the word for magic, the world of magic that exists between, in the gaps between all the worlds. And I believe that's what Web 3 is. We'll start tapping into that and getting profound wisdom. A bit like the Matrix when Neo goes to the source. You know, I think we're at the cusp of something very interesting. You know, and
we'll see what it is, man.
Yeah, no, so we get to the crypto and you look at, there's one called Power City on. Do you know much about Pulse Chain? Have you heard of Pulse Chain?
No.
So Pulse Chain is like Ethereum, but it's going to be much cheaper for the common man to use. But it's a whole DEX, and there's all these projects waiting to launch because it's much cheaper. So it's not the cost of Ethereum, and there's all these guys who have projects waiting in the background. And when Pulse launches, it's just going to go crazy. And I'm really excited about that because I know, I mean, my brothers and sisters, when I talk about crypto, they're all in their 60s, and they look at me like I'm crazy. It's like I'm talking a different language. Yeah, and even some people in their 30s, when I talk about it, they're like, don't get it. But it is the future. And it is the next frontier, just like Star Trek. We're on the borders of that new frontier. It's when it's going to be open up the world. And it's not my world, I'm an old guy now, but it's the world of kids today.
Yeah.
You know, and this is where we can, I was on a plane, and the guy who actually invented Minecraft was sitting next to me. And I was talking to him, and he said, what are you now? So I was ashamed. He goes, oh my God. He said, isn't that all imagination? I said, yeah, it is. He said, what do you mean? I said, it's all imagination. I said, but if I can heal myself and others with imagination, isn't that great? He went, I never thought it like that. I said, yeah, I don't believe it's imagination because the things I see come to pass. But it starts with imagination. It starts with allowing your imagination to run right, just like you creating your game. You allow the game to keep creating all the time. So you're letting the game control. If you let your mind to that, you open up to a whole new dimension and bring magic back into the world. You know, we play games, gaming. Go back 100 years. What you're doing is magic to the people of that time. They just, well, how's that happening? Yeah.
It's true.
And what was the second question you had?
Yeah. So the second question was, let's say, this is the final question. Let's say that you were, you just decided, you know what, one of the other realms was calling you, and it was your time to go to that realm, and you were going to shift into that realm. Let's just say that it happened. And you knew that this was going to happen, but you realized, there's one more time that I'm going to be able to talk to humans. And let's say that that's going to happen tomorrow. What would be the last thing that you would tell humanity if you had one message, one sentence, one paragraph, whatever you want to say? It could be as long or as short. But if you had if you only knew that you had this one time to tell humanity everything, what would you say? Or whatever you want to say.
I'm trying to put this in a few words. There is a story that I tell on, it's called The Woman of the Tame, but it's basically magic is real. But you can't see it with your eyes, you have to see it with your heart. You can't feel it with your hands, you have to feel it with your soul. So don't be afraid and reach. That's all I'd say.
And there it is. All right, man. Thanks for coming on today. So what do you got going on? Yes. So what do you got going on? Where can people find you? What's going on with you?
Okay, so we'll put the link in the messages, but I've got the initiation into Avalon, the Samhain, which is Samhain's the same as Halloween, but it's the old name for it. And it's about waking the dead, but Samhain's the exciting time for me because Samhain is when it's the time of magic. Whereas Beltane in the summer is the time of healing. In the winter, we go into magic and mysteries. And we open up the Avalon initiation where people can sit around the fire, the tribal fire, whether it's online. I'll tell stories, we'll do healings, we'll pass each guardian of the Grail, and then we'll go on a journey to see what that brings up for us. And it started as just a storytelling, but now we call it initiation. So everyone who does it, it's never the same again. And that starts on the 9th of October.
All right.
If you go on the website, I do room readings, I do shamanic teachings. No, I don't teach anybody the shamanic path unless they learn the runes, because that's the medium. So they've got to learn the runes first. and those classes are regularly posted.
Very good.
I hope people have listened and found my yarns quite interesting.
I did. I'm sure plenty of people will, man. And we'll take a look at what you got going on. We'll put it in the show notes. Anyone want to find it? It'll be in the description if you're on YouTube. It'll be in the show notes if you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And check them out. Where can people follow you on social media as well?
So I'm on YouTube, jeremyrjwhite.com on the end of that. I'm on YouTube, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Facebook. Any of you put that in, it normally comes up spiritual teacher and healer or Jeremy J. White, Glastonbury. That'll take you to my Facebook. Anyway, just reach out. I'm always doing stuff. Normally I try and... TikTok's an interesting one, isn't it? It's just like, I normally go to put something on TikTok. I get so engrossed watching the videos on TikTok, I don't have to do anything. Because it's so addictive. But I try and post me doing real medicine on that. So I'm out on the land and I'm actually doing my drumming and chanting and going to the caves and seeing what they're putting this. I've got a special well, which is down by the sea in the caves. It fills up with seawater. I drop runes in there. When we want to know what the mother tells us, I'll put my arm in there and I'll reach out. So that's a good one to watch them, just for a bit of guidance for the times. Because we are all living in safe times, weird times, and stay safe. So I bless you. Thanks for giving me the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Of course, man. Thanks for coming on.